MySpace. In 2006, the king of the internet wasn't Google, it was MySpace. It was the most visited site in the US, accounting for a massive 5% of all web traffic. If you weren't on MySpace, did you even exist? It grew from 0 to 100 million users in a flash, turning a generation of teenagers into amateur web developers just so they could make their profiles look edgy. And let's not forget our only guaranteed friend, Tom. He was everyone's first friend, whether you liked his white t-shirt or not. By 2005, MySpace was so hot that News Corp bought it for $580 million. At its peak in 2007, it was valued at $12 billion. It felt like the party would never end. Until the corporate guys arrived. Reason for failure number 1. The mess. To pay off a billion-dollar deal with Google, MySpace flooded the site with intrusive ads. Combined with users' sparkly background GIFs and auto-playing heavy metal music, the site became a spaghetti ball of broken code that took 5 business days to load. It wasn't a social network anymore. It was a digital landfill. Then a cleaner, faster rival appeared. Facebook didn't let you use Pimp My Profile HTML, and it actually worked. In April 2008, the unthinkable happened. Facebook overtook MySpace in global traffic. MySpace tried to pivot, but it was like watching your grandpa try to use TikTok. It was just awkward. The fall was brutal. By 2011, the company was sold for just $35 million, a staggering 99% drop from its peak value. To make matters worse, during a server move in 2019, they accidentally deleted 50 million songs and 12 years of photos. An entire generation's emo phase was wiped from history in a single click. Today, MySpace is basically a ghost town for indie bands. Blackberry. Long before the iPhone, there was only one status symbol that mattered: the Blackberry. It was so addictive that people literally nicknamed it the Crackberry. In 2008, BlackBerry owned 50% of the US smartphone market and was worth a staggering $75 billion. From Wall Street CEOs to President Obama, if you didn't have a clickable QWERTY keyboard, you were basically living in the Stone Age. Their secret weapon? A keyboard that actually clicked and a battery that lasted for days. While everyone else was struggling with T9 texting, hitting the number 7 4 times just to type the letter S, BlackBerry users were sending emails like professional typists. They were the kings of productivity, and they thought they were invincible. But then 2007 happened. Steve Jobs walked onto a stage and showed the world a phone with no buttons. BlackBerry's leadership literally laughed at it, calling the iPhone a toy with terrible security. They were so busy protecting their precious physical keyboard that they completely missed the fact that the world wanted apps, big screens, and, well, fun. Desperate to catch up, they released the BlackBerry Storm, a touchscreen phone that actually clicked when you pressed it. It was slow, buggy, and users hated it. By 2016, their global market share didn't just drop, it hit 0.0%. They went from a $75 billion empire to selling their mobile patents for spare change. Today, BlackBerry doesn't even make phones. They make cybersecurity software for cars. ToysRUs. For decades, this logo was the only thing that mattered to a kid on their birthday. Founded in 1948, ToysRUs became a global empire with 1,600 stores and $11 billion in annual revenue. They were so dominant that they didn't just sell toys, they decided which ones would become famous. The signs were always there. That famous backward R was meant to look like a child's handwriting, but it turned out to be a prophecy. The company was literally going backward in profit until they hit zero. The real killer wasn't a lack of customers, it was the debt. In 2005, a group of private equity firms bought the company using a leveraged buyout. Essentially, they bought the store using a massive loan and then made the store pay it back. Toys R Us was suddenly carrying $5 billion in debt, paying $400 million a year just in interest. That's a lot of Lego sets just to pay the bank. Then came the ultimate oops.
Instead of building their own website, Toys R Us hired a tiny startup called Amazon to run it for them. It was like hiring a hungry wolf to guard your sheep because you were too lazy to build a fence. By the time they realized Amazon was their biggest rival, the wolf had already eaten the sheep, the fence, and the entire toy industry. By 2017, the game was over. The stores were outdated, the website was a mess, and the debt finally crushed them. They filed for bankruptcy, and by 2018, Jeffrey the giraffe was officially unemployed. 33,000 people lost their jobs, leaving a generation of Toys R Us kids with nothing but nostalgia and a very sad theme song. Today, the brand lives on as a small shelf inside Macy's stores, but the empire is dead.
Yahoo. Before Google was a verb, Yahoo was the internet. In the late 90s, if you wanted to find anything online, you went to Yahoo first. They were the ultimate digital empire, peaking in the year 2000 with a massive $125 billion valuation. They owned your email, your news, and your homepage. At one point, they were so big that they were actually more popular than Google and Facebook combined. Their rise was fueled by being the first portal. They didn't just give you a search bar, they gave you everything. Weather, sports, horoscopes. They were the undisputed kings of the dot-com boom, and they had so much cash they could have bought almost any company on the planet. But then came the Hall of Fame of bad decisions. In 1998, two kids offered to sell a tiny startup called Google to Yahoo for just $1 million. Yahoo said no because Google's search was too fast. They wanted people to stay on Yahoo pages to look at ads. A few years later, they tried to buy Google for $3 billion, but when Google asked for $5, Yahoo walked away. Today, Google is worth $2 trillion. Oops. They didn't stop there. In 2006, Yahoo offered $1 billion for Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg was actually going to say yes, but Yahoo tried to be clever and lowered their offer to $850 million at the last second. Yahoo tried to fix it the next day, but the social media king had already left the building. By 2013, they were desperate to be cool again, so they bought Tumblr for $1.1 billion. They managed to ruin the platform so effectively that they eventually sold it for less than $3 million. That is the corporate equivalent of buying a Ferrari and trading it in for a used bicycle 6 years later. The end came in 2017. Verizon bought the remains of Yahoo for just $4.4 billion, roughly 4% of what they were once worth. Nokia. Before smartphones were a thing, there was only one king of the mobile world, Nokia. At its peak in 2007, Nokia controlled a massive 40% of the global mobile phone market. They weren't just a tech company, they were a cultural phenomenon. From the busy streets of New York to the smallest villages in Asia, if you had a phone in your pocket, it probably had that iconic connecting people ringtone. Their rise was built on one thing: indestructibility. The Nokia 3310 is a legend. You could drop it from a building, run it over with a car, or drop it in a lake, and it would still let you play Snake for 10 hours straight. They built phones that lasted forever, and by the early 2000s, Nokia was worth over $250 billion. They felt untouchable. But while everyone was addicted to hitting 2, 4, 6, 8 to move a pixelated snake, the world was changing. Nokia's leadership was so confident in their physical buttons and indestructible hardware that they stopped looking at software. They believed people wanted a phone that could survive a nuclear blast, not a phone that could browse the actual internet. Then came 2007. Steve Jobs walked onto a stage and showed the world the iPhone. Nokia's executives literally laughed at it. They called it a toy because it broke easily and had terrible battery life. They didn't realize that people were willing to trade a brick for a computer that fit in their pocket. By the time Nokia realized touchscreens were the future, they were 5 years too late. In a desperate Hail Mary pass, Nokia partnered with Microsoft in 2011 to use the Windows Phone operating system. It was a disaster. It was like two drowning people grabbing onto each other to stay afloat. They both just sank faster.
By 2013, Nokia's mobile division was sold to Microsoft for just $7 billion, a 97% drop from their peak value. Today, Nokia doesn't even make their own phones anymore. They just license the name out and focus on 5G network towers. Kodak. For over 100 years, Kodak didn't just sell cameras, they sold memories. At their peak in the 1990s, they were a global superpower, owning 90% of the film market and 85% of camera sales in the US alone. Their slogan, "A Kodak Moment," was part of the global vocabulary. They were worth over $30 billion and felt as permanent as the photos they printed. Their rise was fueled by making photography easy for everyone. Before Kodak, taking a picture was a scientific experiment. They simplified it, sold the cameras cheap, and made billions selling the film and chemicals. It was a perfect business model, until they accidentally invented their own assassin. In 1975, a Kodak engineer named Steve Sasson invented the world's first digital camera. It was the size of a toaster and took 23 seconds to record a grainy black and white photo. When he showed it to the bosses at Kodak, they didn't give him a promotion. Instead, they told him to hide it. They were so terrified of digital killing their profitable film business that they buried the future in a drawer. While Kodak was busy protecting their film empire, rivals like Sony and Canon saw the opening. By the late 90s, digital cameras were everywhere. Kodak finally tried to join the race, but they were in a state of denial. They kept trying to force people to print their digital photos at Kodak kiosks instead of just sharing them online. The collapse was devastating. In 2012, the company that wants to find photography officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They went from a $30 billion legend to a company selling off its patents just to keep the lights on. They had the future in their hands in 1975 and decided it wasn't worth the moment. Today, Kodak is a shell of its former self, focusing mostly on commercial printing and even trying to get into pharmaceuticals.